Okay, so let's see if more people are going to join us later. I would like still to be in time with starting with the virtual meeting, and I would like to start to also saying that we're going to record the meeting, and if you would like to remain anonymous or not visible, you would need to mute your microphone and mute your video, of course. So today's webinar is about, so the recording will basically start now. The meeting today in the frame of the EU-SPI pilot project is about the survey that we had sent out earlier this year and evaluated. So you're quite familiar, and I don't need to introduce that very much. Our speakers are Frederic Meyer and Laurent Laurich. They're both working at the Technopolis Group in Berlin. And my name is Elke Dahl, and I work at the Center for Social Innovation in Vienna. And there is also with us Tonya from Technopolis. I should by now know how to pronounce your Greek name. I still hesitate to do it. We're expecting a few more people as well from the communications that we had, but let's see that we are starting with a tour de table as well, and then our two speakers will present in an aggregated manner the results of this survey, and the idea is really then to capture also your remarks again and your experiences and your questions, because they will lead into the peer learning event that we're also supposed to be organizing in this project in the second half of 2019. So for the logistics, just we have this tool has a possibility to raise your hands. So this is a tool that you just click, and I will see that you would like to speak, and also Fred will see that, and Laurent, so we can give you the floor, and it really makes an interactive session. And then you need to unmute yourself to be able to speak. So you will receive access to the PowerPoint afterwards, of course, and then as soon as it's finished and accepted, also to the full report. And with that, if I haven't forgotten anything, we should have this very quick tour de table, because it's our colleagues from Catalonia do not have the microphone, so we can just wave to them and say hello to Javier. We have a colleague from Extremadura with us today, Carmen. Would you like to say hello? I hope we haven't lost her, but it's just I'm waving also to Extremadura. And then it boils. Was there a sound?
Yeah.
That was it. Ah, hello. Hi. Perfect. So we know that works. And we have our colleagues from Portugal that I will hope will also actively participate in the discussion. Hello from our side. Works on your side?
Hello. Morning. Morning.
It does. Very good. Then I would like to kind of like ask into the ether, because there is a possibility also to join via phone, and then we don't, of course, see the video. So is there anyone else? Okay, not yet, not right now. Tonya, would you like to say hello as well? Because I know that you're there.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Elke, for managing this whole discussion. I'm looking forward to the presentation. If you have any technical problem, just raise your hand, and if I can help, I'll be happy to. So let's have a good discussion here and good presentation.
Super. So that's it from my side, and I hand over already to Frederic, who will say a few words about the agenda of today.
So first, good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here and attending to this webinar about the results of the EU-SPI. I'm going to present today. So So with the agenda as it's here presented. So as my colleague Elsa just mentioned, it's an aggregated presentation of the results from the survey. To put a bit of context, I mean, some of you, for the participants that at least are here right now, you know pretty well the pilot project, because either you are a pilot region or associated region to the project. So you also received the bit and you're aware of the activities that we are conducting. So the survey is one of the activities that are among the methodology that we have for the qualitative assessment of the EU-SPI. We were preparing the survey in March and fine-tuning it and testing it, and we launched it I think until of May it was open. Hello, Lena.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
We just had a quick tour of the tab, so maybe before I go on, you want to say hi to all, and then we'll unmute your mic so that.
I have a problem with my mic, but I'll try to do it. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Lena Tsipuri from the University of Athens. I'm actually working on the potential revision, enrichment, changes of the SPI. So I'm very, very interested to listen to your ideas and reactions.
Thank you, Lena. So I'm gonna, okay. Okay. So as I was saying, we had the survey open mostly in the months of April until beginning of March, until beginning of May. So then in May, with our team, we conducted the analysis of the survey results, and we prepared a report that, as also Elke mentioned to you, is going to be available to all of you optimistically in the coming weeks. So this is the first stage, the idea of using one of the virtual meetings to present these results in an aggregated manner. As you can see from the agenda, we have 4 main blocks, because the approach that we use during the survey is to have questions that regard the evaluation questions on relevance, coherence, effectiveness, and EU added value of the EU-SPI. The typology of the questions that we had, as you saw if you responded to it, is that it was tick box, so closed questions. But we also had some open questions that we also made an analysis. And I think of a bit of the idea. So we are going to present this in an aggregated manner. We're also going to present some of the results that were compiled in the open-ended questions. And I think that given that this is a virtual meeting and you're present here, and some of you responded to these questions, I also have specific examples or ideas behind why you answered this or that. It's also good to share with all of the participants why, for example, you suggested that mobility or culture should be added to the components, or maybe other things that were addressed during this survey. So the first thing as to start, presentation of the survey. Okay, so this gives an overview a bit of who responded, who was contacted, from which countries the organizations that answer to the survey are based. So the first thing to say is that we invited, at least directly us, around 660 people to take the survey. This included people that know very well the pilot, so our pilot associated regions, pilot regions, but also we used a list from the Committee of the Regions on policymakers from the European regions in order to forward them the survey and ask them to respond. Why did I say this include only the people that we invited directly? Because as it was mentioned also in the guidelines when we sent the survey around, we asked you to feel free to share this the survey link to other organizations or colleagues that you have that might be potential users of the EU-SPI and would have something interesting, an interesting contribution to bring to the project by also adding responding to this survey. So by the beginning of May, we received 174 responses. We had to do a bit of internal cleaning and seeing what type of responses that we receive, remove a bit some of the click-through and stuff like that. And it seems a bit like we did it on purpose, but at the end, the number that we had and that we could really use for the analysis was 100 respondents. If we look at the administrative level that the organizations that responded to it operate. So most of them, 47% say that they act at regional level, 30% at national level. So this is not surprising, but we also have a bit other organizations that act at all levels, so local or city, provincial, EU. Some even mention that they correspond to all levels. So that gives a bit of the picture of at which level does these organizations that responded operate. Now, if we look at from which countries they come from, so we see that we managed to capture not only regions from countries that are part of our core pilot and associated regions, but also from other countries. We have a total of 19 EU member states that we can say are represented now in this survey. We have, of course, a large proportion for countries such as Portugal, Spain, Greece, Slovakia. This is also explained with these are countries where we have pilot regions, associated regions, and where also work has been done there of communicating and sending, talking about the pilot to the stakeholders of the country and communicating about the survey to the several stakeholders. When looking at the chart like this and presenting data that is aggregated with all of the responses, one might directly think, oh, but maybe then the answers are going to be biased by being over-representative of what Portugal, Spain, or Greece thinks. Should some weighting system be applied to present the answers? Well, we internally discussed this, and if you present here today took the survey, as you saw, all the questions were addressed at the level of organization. Does your organization find this useful or no? Or would you, as an organization that potentially could use a EU-SPI at this or that, etc.? So we are interested at the responses by organization, by potential user of the EU-SPI. So our intention was not to do some kind of weighting or representativeness of the EU landscape based on some population weighting or other. Although we do know that some questions might be biased or might be affected by a regional or national context. We had some of these questions when we asked, for example, is this component an important policy priority within the organization? Of course, the answer might be affected by the fact that your organization, it's in a region where some specific topic is a national or regional priority. So when this is the case, when we found that, for example, the context might affect the answer, what we did is that we have in the full survey analysis that will be shared with all of you, there is an annex where we have a bit of the results of the specific answer per country. So you can see, if you're interested in the situation of a specific country, you can see if this affected or how the answers are not provided by a country. The country that we have, we could not do it for all, is basically the countries from which we have a pilot region. So Portugal, Spain, Greece, Slovakia, the ones that receive significant numbers of responses all have this in the annex, and for these questions only that might be affected by the context of the policy priority context of a specific region or country. So this gives a bit now of the explanation and how we presented the results. Now, still a bit in the overview, we asked all respondents if they are familiar or no with first with the Global Social Progress Index, and also if they are familiar with the EU-SPI. What we can see from the responses is that most are familiar with both. This can be explained, of course, first because they have been involved in the pilot, so they know about this, or maybe they have known from other source. But at least we know from this that the responses, the people that took the survey respond to questions about the EU-SPI, knowing about what it is, are familiar with it, and to some of them, they also know about the Global Social Progress Index, so they have maybe a bit more of background about where this all came from. No, so that's a good sign to say that the answers that we receive from the survey are based on a knowledge of familiarity, at least some familiarity with the EU-SPI. And then we ask, of course, just to see a bit how our sample of the respondents can be categorized in terms of familiarity with the EU-SPI pilot project. So 40% of the respondents come from organizations that are located in a region that is part of the pilot, and 11% is from a region that comes from an associated region. Some knew about the project, but they said that they come from a region that has no involvement with the pilot, 12%, and then we have also 37% that they hear about the pilot project from the first time. So we also have a bit of plurality, of different respondents on the basis of the knowledge, with what we're doing in the framework of this on this pilot project. So now I'm going to move into questions that were more focused about aspects regarding the relevance of the EU-SPI. So a first slide to show is that, now I guess from the ones that I see are present today, most of you are familiar with the SPI, with its different pillars and components. So one of the first tasks of the survey was really to ask for each component, if you feel as an organization that might be a potential user of the SPI, if you feel that first, that the components represent an important policy priority within your organization. So that's what the first thing that we ask. And the second one, if then by looking at the score, if this score represents the reality or your perception of the reality within your region, say of interest, if your organization at region level, that one, or national, the regions that interest you. So what we can say globally is that looking at the responses that we receive for each of the components, normally between 70 and 90% of respondents say that it's a very or fairly important policy priority for their organization, each of the components. So that shows, difficult always to give a quick, jump into a quick conclusion, but at least that with the components that are there in the EU-SPI, that it's relevant, it's an important policy priority for the organization that took the survey. And then when we ask if these, before I go to the second part, we noted down 3 in blue here that are the ones that scored a bit highest, in terms of policy priority. So nutrition, basic and medical care, access to basic knowledge, and health of wellness scored even a bit higher than the other ones. So closer to this 90% that we see in the first paragraph. And then when we ask if the score reflects the reality, normally, 70 to 80% sense that it reflects the fairly, the perception of the results within this component of the region. Now, this of course gives room to a 30 or 20% that either don't know how to answer the question or think it does not reflect the reality. This is something that we also ask specifically in other questions of the survey, and we ask people to give a bit more information of why they think something might not represent the reality. So we will come to that a bit later, and we will actually also open the floor for hearing your stories about this. So yes, we also had a question still regarding this coherence, if at which administrative level do they think the EU-SPI can be a useful tool. So if we take it overall, is that in all cases, at least for 70% of the respondents, they think it could be fairly or very useful. And maybe not surprisingly, what stands out, it's the national level and regional level, probably mainly because that's the levels at which the policies are decided and are made. So here's that for the usefulness at the different administrative levels. And now, before giving the floor to my colleague Laurent, I would like to introduce also to another set of questions that were in the format of the open questions, where we gave room to people to to give a bit of their story of what should be added or modified from the EU-SPI. So we asked that regarding two aspects. So the first aspect is, as you know, when you look at the score of the EU-SPI, you have the score of the region, this traffic light system, and it's compared to 15 regions, a cluster of 15 regions that have the same, more or less the same GDP level. So one of the questions that we raised to all is, okay, if you were to consider other criteria for this peers comparison, what criteria would you add? So this was one question that we asked. And the other one is, you know, there are 12 components. They cover different areas of social progress. So we also wanted to know, and we had to do it in the format also of open-ended, which other areas would you like the EU-SPI to include, or that might be missing? So for this, my colleague Laurent will tell you a bit of the story behind these word clouds. Laurent?
Yeah, thank you, Fred, and good morning, everyone. So for the first question, we asked respondents if new criteria other than GDP should be considered for peers comparison between regions. So to this question, 64% of the respondents answered that they were in favor of using new criteria other than GDP to compare the regions between each other. And when asked to specify, so we made this word cloud, and around 50 respondents answered. And the most recurrent answers and propositions were demography, urban and rural disparities, and as well educational level unemployment. So demography was the most mentioned one. It was mentioned 12 times, and it was so several propositions were made in the framework of demography, namely population trends, median age, cultural characteristics related to demography, such as religion or beliefs. Whereas urban and rural disparities was already less mentioned, 6 respondents, and it referred to the assessment of the social progress with regions who have a similar economic profile. And for your information, the rest of the criteria that you can see in the word cloud were mentioned less than 2 times. So I will not go into detail for these ones. For the second question, so what areas not covered in the EU-SPI could also be included as a measure of social progress? We had as well a very important amount of answers. So a lot of respondents mentioned multiple areas. So we did a breakdown as well, and the most recurrent answers were culture and mobility far ahead, followed by accessibility. So culture could be comprised cultural access, culture related to social dimensions such as social commitment or the preservation of cultural heritage. Whereas mobility was more focused on accessibility to public transports and sustainable mobility and urban mobility. Whereas accessibility comprised both culture and mobility, but also access to green spaces, to public and to social services. So it would be interesting to have your opinion about this.
Yeah, so part of the exercise then, as I said a bit in the introduction and also Elke mentioned, is that, I mean, you know, we had these open questions. Some of you in the survey started providing us a bit of hints of things that could be added, suggestions, but it would be interesting to know a bit more the story behind, and to allow also for you to share this with the group here today. So 2 questions. Do you agree with the suggested criteria that could be considered for peers comparison? Is there one that you find most important or no? For which region? For which reason, sorry. And then for the part that is about the components, if you could please share with us potential areas that could also be included in the EU-SPI. I mean, we also open the floor for a bit of an exchange or a concrete example. I mean, we know for a fact now also that we have been looking into the different case studies, no activities, and then also of this qualitative work package, that there are some opinions from one region to another, from one stakeholder to another about things that could be added. So, I mean, we moderating the survey and the case study, we have some ideas, but I think for all of the present here, it will be also interesting to hear a bit of your story. So I don't know if there's one that would like to raise a first hand and share a bit react on any of the things that you saw here, something missing, something that you would add, or if you also share, for example, culture mobility specifically regarding what or about which indicators.
So there are, I think we're trying to nudge our Portuguese colleagues to give us their opinion, because they are the more visible ones here. I'm sure that you had an exchange already with Fred about some of those issues, but as we have Lena, Antonia, etc. also here, we would be...
Yeah, I think, I mean, we are not many today, but there is also, I know Lena has also a lot of information about information that she collected from her field visit in Western Greece, or maybe Tonia also with the overview. So, I mean, it's for all to have a discussion, to share concrete examples, and before we move on to the next part, like that will make it also a bit more.
But I think you did unmute yourself briefly, so the floor is yours. I think you wanted to say something, no?
Me?
I'm sorry, yeah.
No. I just said something.
No, our colleagues from Portugal.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Yes, we have already discussed these issues in our meetings with Frederick and with our stakeholders last week. In fact, the criteria, the other criteria behind GDP to peers comparison is the same. Demography, I think demography is population,
yeah,
is the most voted one, and urban rural disparities too is an issue that is very is proposed. In the other issue, I think that the labor market is a theme that is most often proposed to be included, and also civic participation, I think. Frederick, you could...
Exactly. This is also, that also was good to share, and good then to also, because for all to remind, we have a series of activities within the work package of the qualitative assessment. Our exercise is also then to triangulate, to go more into detail than when we do the field visit. So it's true that I'm not surprised with what Carla just said, and then the results that are here, in the sense that the urban-rural disparities, when you go into the region and you talk to the people, a lot. With the fact that in Centro, from one part or to the other of the region, the reality is very different. And then, of course, the demography is the population to compare with them is something I think that also appears not only from the regions that I know a bit more now, but also from the others. And it's interesting to see also that some answers were provided for the people that responded to the survey, but then when we did the field visit, as also Carla mentioned, we had other things that appeared, so the labor market as one example, and this also the civic participation. That when I'm trying to look a bit more in detail here, I don't know if it's even mentioned in the smaller ones. But then when we do this exercise of doing the case studies and talking to the people, some other things also appear. So they were putting, for example, into context that with the abstention rates that we have nowadays, it could be also maybe important to have a bit of a measure of how much people go to vote, etc. So these are other things that help us collecting potential new areas for the EU-SPI, not only from the information from the survey, but also from the field visit. I don't know, then, Elke, so you asked Xavier if he would like to add something, or maybe we could hear from our colleagues in Extremadura very quickly, if they have any reaction on this before we move to the next part. We agree with rural disparities, and demography should be used to complement the existing one in order to try to compare regions with similar profiles. That could be density. So, okay, in line also with what we have here, what Centro said with the views of also of Catalonia. Lena, before we move, maybe like that, we have a bit, everyone says a bit something with experience from Western Greece.
Not so much. I mean, Western Greece, they totally agree with the general comments. It's almost as if you were reporting the results of Western Greece. In terms of urban-rural disparities, they are very worried. And I think this is an interesting topic. They raised this first with regard to the environmental indicators. They said that measurement actually takes place in cities. And I think it will be an interesting topic to discuss also in more detail with the Commission. What the idea of having environmental indicators at the regional level is actually indicators measured at city level and then divided by the surface of the region, which means that the more cities in the region, the worse the indicator on environmental quality. So somehow this reflects very much the urban-rural disparities level. The demography issue is also very important, not only in terms of the evolution of demographics, but also the composition of demographics. There are some regions where vulnerable groups, for whatever it may mean in each region, are a higher share than in other regions. And this needs to be reflected. For instance, in Western Greece has an important port to the rest of Europe. So lots of migrants coming from Syria, Turkey, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, you name it. They try to end up in the port of Patras to probably illegally take a ship and go to the European Union members, the other European Union member states. This, of course, affects the SPI very heavily because these people have no dwellings, no medical security. They're not even measured under demographics. So this is a case where I think the results of Western Greece very much fit with demography. Regarding the other areas for measuring social progress, culture, yes, they didn't mention mobility, and they didn't mention, well, they did mention accessibility in the sense of an international airport. The other thing that was mentioned was rather than having the share of people accessing broadband or internet at home and so on, they would also like to see the cost of access to broadband and internet, because they claim that this is something that is much higher in Greece than in other regions. And this takes me to an issue we are going to raise in the overall discussion when we discuss the potential changes, which is the indicators that are determined at national level and are then reflected at the regional level. And then we have a real problem. For instance, cost of accessibility to mobile internet or mobile broadband or 5G in the future. This is something that in most countries that I know, probably all EU member states, it is determined by national, if not pan-European companies. And this affects, of course, the region, but the region cannot somehow influence the indicator. So these are the areas which have been set up have been suggested by the region of Western Greece. Of course, in the near future, we are going to send to all the regions a full compilation of what comes up from the regions, which is complementing the survey with case study data.
Thank you, Lena.
I think we can move to the next part of the presentation.
So, okay. So now a few aspects about questions that were more regarding the coherence of the EU-SPI. So first things that we started looking at is asking whether there are other indicators, frameworks for measuring social progress and well-being that are used by the organizations that responded to the survey. This is to add, I mean, that we have done a first work of this research to see what are the other frameworks that are out there. We have been asking people, I mean, also doing the field visits, if they use the EU-SPI, if they can use it also in complement with other frameworks. So in the survey, we wanted to start collecting a bit this info of, okay, to which extent the respondents say that they do use or know this other framework. So we have 32% that organization that responded that they do. And then we wanted to collect a bit also of information of what are these other indicator frameworks. So there was an open question about this, and the ones that we managed to collect via the surveys, social justice index, human development index, social vulnerability index, sustainable society index, the regional composite index, and indicator framework of the European Social Fund. So this also always in the idea of that this is a tool to triangulate with all the sources of information. It allowed us to see from frameworks that we collected which are other ones that are being used. And this is something that also when we have been doing work and going into the regions, we have been asking people, okay, what other frameworks do you use? Some are developed maybe only at regional, national level. So this is also something that conducting a work of field visit added to responses that we started collecting signals, no, that we started collecting from the survey. Okay, so this was about the reality with the region. Okay, so as I said a few slides before, we asked people if they feel that the score from the components reflect the reality of the region. When we looked overall, it was, I think, 70 to 80% respond that it fairly corresponds to their perception of the reality of the region. So this gives rooms also for some people not being very happy about specific results of the EU-SPI. So we wanted to ask very openly, okay, what are these maybe components where you feel that it does not translate the reality, the perception that you have of a specific component of your region. We had then an open-ended question about it. Laurent, of the analysis, what did you find there?
So about this open question, it was interesting to see that so we did the breakdown of the observations of the respondents who were probably the ones who disagreed in the previous question that Fred presented. Yeah. And we had some interesting results. And so the most result contested components, according to the respondents, are access to basic knowledge, access to advanced education, environmental equality, and access to information and communication. One interesting remark to do now is that access to basic knowledge was as well considered as reflecting the reality of the EU-SPI. Reflecting the reality, sorry. But it was interesting to look at the reasons that were suggested by the respondents. So some respondents stated that maybe the data was not up to date, or that the indicators lacked robustness, because they were sometimes perception-based. And as well, some other respondents thought that there was a trend of the studied component that was in contradiction with the result advanced by the EU-SPI.
So it's very interesting because this, when we started analyzing the survey and we started looking a bit of these reasons of why some organizations might be discontent with the reflection of the score, with their perception of the reality, it helped us to prepare the ground for going into the field visit and also dig a bit more what are these things that might affect the accuracy of the results. I wanted to take the opportunity also to open the floor again to a discussion about this. I have a bit of our story, freshly stories in head of the visit that I recently conducted in Centro, where some of the things that Laurent mentioned from things that were indicated in the survey appeared again when we conducted the case study. For example, this aspect of the outdated data, the aspect of the perception, so the subjective indicators. So I think now we open the floor to discussion and your concrete examples or stories about this. Is your organization among the ones who responded that specific components did not reflect the reality of the region? And could you please share with us what were these components and for which reasons? And I just saw, but maybe okay, that Xavier wrote down something. I give you the floor. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, Javier, he was commenting on the previous question, so don't know. But I can summarize quickly. It's one of the aspects he mentioned was mobility as well. But then he had very interesting comment also about culture consumption. So in Catalonia, they have their own set of indicators, and in this one, they are using household spending on cultural service as an indicator. He also points out that for a European comparison, this indicator is probably not the best one because the different countries have different payment and subsidy policies for cultural equipment and cultural activities. And that varies among the different countries. So that was his input on the previous question.
Thank you, Xavier. So now, regarding maybe these aspects of components that don't reflect the reality and reasons that might be behind this, anyone to comment or to provide his opinion on this? Provide a bit more context of why we found these results here.
Hello, Fred. This is Tonya. I just wanted to discuss my experience a little bit with one of the two regions that I visited for the case studies, discussing about Eastern Slovenia. The idea is that we go there and try to identify what is of most importance for each of the regions. Well, it always depends whether what we know about the regions is the actual story. So in principle, we have in Slovenia NUTS 2 regions, Eastern and Western Slovenia, and there are also 12 NUTS 3 regions, but they are only there statistically, which means that they do not have any authority in terms of policy making and in terms of decision making for what is best for the region. In practice, what is there is the central government that is located in Ljubljana, and the next level of governance in practice is the mayors at NUTS 5 level. So what we see in the index is something plasmatic. It's not real. It's a reflection of what happens overall in the country, and the division, I don't know how exactly, and they didn't know exactly how this was calculated. So this is really a problem, because you may see some very good scores, but from what I have understood, this does not really reflect the situation in all the parts of the country, and in their case, in Eastern Slovenia. So I believe the matter of governance, when we have only statistical regions and not actual regions with authority that can take policy decisions and put them into policy practice, this is one of the biggest problems that we may face, and I know that this might be also the case for some other regions, just to say.
Yeah, just very quickly, I confirm that this was also heard in when I visited the colleague of Centro.
Thank you.
Okay, I can say a few words from Western Greece. The first, and that refers, to, of course, to which components do not reflect the reality of your region, in your opinion. They raised the issue of timing, because SPI, for obvious reasons, has had, at least in the past, quite a long time lag. There are some areas where there are major changes within this time frame. To give you an example from Western Greece, traffic deaths, the region is among the worst in Europe. And the reason was very clear why, because there were no motorways leading to the capital city. In particular, the connection between Athens and Patras was a horrible connection. All my friends, professors from the University of Patras, used to say, "You're not coming to Athens, it's too dangerous." The motorway from Athens to Patras has been completed a couple of months ago, quite a few months ago. And then the motorway from Patras to Pyrgos has been completed, and there is another part, from Patras to Thessaloniki has been completed, and the one from Patras to Pyrgos is in the process of being completed. So in a sense, the indicator came too late, and people knew very well that these motorway delays were a very serious problem for social progress. And to look at this indicator now, it's useless. So it's a little bit, the time lag needs to be connected to reality, because this is not only the case of the roads, it's also the results of the crisis, because different regions were affected differently by the crisis and so on. So somehow, we need to, their point, and I think it's a fair point, is that the Commission needs to be urged to come to more recent data. So how they can do it, it's a different story, but some sort of pressure for updating the indicators much faster is important. And the second point is trust. Because trust, a little bit like the cost of accessibility that I mentioned before, very often it's a national indicator which is taken into the regional indicators. And trust, I think this also was reflected by the worries of Navarra, who sent a message, although they could not participate, and it's the so-called subjective indicators. Subjective indicators are the results of surveys, and trust in particular is a very complex issue. And like Navarra, Western Greece has suggested to try and find some indicators that are more objective, in brackets. For instance, trust in the legal system. Is it better if we ask people, do you trust the legal system? And then we see a huge disparity between northern and southern regions. Or would it be better to select some more objective indicators like time to get a court decision, or time to get to a final court decision, like going into courts of higher instances, or number of petty crimes reported, or things like that. So I think this trust indicator is an area where we have to intervene more seriously.
Absolutely agree, and I think our colleagues from Centro would also agree, because this is the discussions that we had so much regarding the perception indicators. Although we had as a thematic focus education and digital literacy, still everyone was jumping on, no, but look here are these things of trust, we have to talk about it, because Elke, maybe I'll give you the floor now, because I think Xavi is also pointing out something related to this.
Yeah, it's exactly that that I thought I'll bring in Javier's just a few sentences that he sent, and also that they were exactly on that point. The indicators about the citizens' opinion on the government, the judicial system, and the police, and to complement those with other indicators. And I think the examples that Lena gave are very good ones or possible ones. And he also says we are trying to find which indicator could be complementing these more subjective trust-related ones. So yeah, that was 2 little comments from there.
Okay.
And I think you can continue with the presentation.
Okay. So we can...
If the Portuguese colleagues don't want to, you're fine.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. So still on the coherence, we can move a bit faster with this slide, but it's just to show you also some of the questions that we asked is whether within the present national regional cohesion policies of the from the different regions and then relating to organizations that responded to the survey, we ask if there are other areas that are covered within their national regional cohesion policies. So this goes a bit is different from the wish list of what would you like to add. Here the question is from what is already going, what is already a priority at your national regional level, what is already included as a priority that is outside of economics. So we found in some of the responses in the work cloud that you can see to the right that some of the things that were mentioned in the wish list for some of the regions or regional and national level are already things that are being used, are already considered as something that they include in the regional and national cohesion policies. We see again culture, we see again aspects regarding it was interesting also to read that there are things as energy efficiency, disabilities. It was also interesting to hear to have a bit of this. Just we have a new colleague. I'm just going to mute for the moment. Okay. Okay, so we can continue to the next slide. Okay, so here also regarding maybe coherence, the time frame from the update of the EU-SPI, or we asked in the survey what would be the optimal time where there should be an update. I mean, from most of the people, 54% expressed that it could be every 2 years. But this is also a question now a bit to put into context of what is possible to be done, to which level does it make sense to have something really every year or every 2 years, how could it be implemented? I mean, we know that we have to say a few words to the Commission regarding the fact that some data are really not up to date, and this then makes it that it's not useful for policy making purposes. So in a bit of the wish list now of how often should there be at least new indicators from the results that we got from the survey, because then in each region we feel this is the reality might be different, but from the survey it seems to be 2 or 3 years, the things that have been mostly said. Then we try to make a bit of a link also to ask if they think that the EU-SPI can be useful for measuring progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So here you have a very green positive signal that for the different stakeholders that took the survey, that there is a strong link. Okay. Now going into effectiveness of the EU-SPI. So first thing is that we asked people to indicate what is, to their opinion, the primary purpose of the EU-SPI. We did this in a setup where we provided several options and the people could select multiple answers. So it's a bit checking if things correspond to what we thought or no. So obviously the feature that appeared the most, 65% of people mentioned that, is this comparison features with other regions in the EU. And also when we had discussions about, now talking about my own experience in the field, is it about added value SPI? This is something that people will continue to bring on. This does not mean that it can be uniquely, solely used for this, and that it should not be contrasted with other indicator frameworks, but it points out that in what the EU-SPI is, this comparison with other regions of the EU is really something that appears quite a lot. And yeah, especially if we take into context of using the EU-SPI for comparing with other regions within your same country. It's true that when we were talking with region and we asked about their wish list of features that could be added, for example, into as a peers comparison. We heard also this from stakeholders, for example, in Central. It might be the case for other regions. They say, but it would be interesting also to have a feature where we can, in 2 clicks, have, okay, see how we compare each other with other regions within our country. But of course, the main primary purpose, this comparison with other regions in the EU. And is the EU-SPI used as a benchmark or motivating device to improve relative regional performance? We wanted to see how people feel about this, and there's all of the green is above the 50%, so a majority of respondents think that this can be used as a tool for motivating or benchmarking with other regions and trying to improve then these aspects that maybe some regions underperform in comparison to others. This is an interesting slide where I want to spend a bit more time and then open the floor to a quick discussion, and checking also with the time. I think we are okay. So the big question is, to which extent is the EU-SPI used for policymaking purposes by your organization? So really, today you have this, it's available. To which extent can it be used? So we ask openly this question. So we see here that the green struggles a bit more to go to the levels that we had in other questions. That there are reasons why. Part of our job is to figure out why, not only with the survey, but with other activities. And when we wanted to go a bit more into the detail of how indicators have been used in terms of different exercises, so we asked about usefulness in terms of decisions related to EU cohesion policy, evaluation and or monitoring of public policies, programs or projects, implementation of public policies and programs, for things regarding decision making about public policies and programs, or agenda setting and prioritization. So these are things that, at least to my humble knowledge, can be a bit strong in the sense of using an indicator framework to apply then with these different exercises. I was when I first received the results of the survey, and I checked that, I was surprised to see that there's sometimes things that reach level of above 30% of too large and to some extent. One of the things that then each of us as case study, say, leaders are meant to do with the regions is to try to figure out, okay, to which extent this is being used and in concrete examples. So I'm very interested to hear for the people that are present here today, if you have if your organization was among the ones who responded that they do use the EU-SPI for policy making purposes, especially if you are with the ones that responded to that with the green colors, large and to some extent, and share with us for which specific purpose did the organization use it, and why do I insist about that? And I would like to have a discussion around this today, is because sometimes what you collect in a survey gives you a signal, indicates you something, but then when you go into the field and you actually ask the different stakeholders, potential users, the reality, the perception that you receive can be a bit of another. Also opening the floor for Carla and Wanda to comment if they wish. But for example, in Centro, the perception that I had is that then, at the time of the truth, at least today, of using it for these different aspects that are here, maybe the EU-SPI is still not robust enough, solid enough in order to confidently say, okay, we can use it for decisions relating to EU cohesion policy, etc. So things need to be put into context, need to be contrasted, and yeah, I want to hear from the people that are present here today if there is a particular example maybe of that relates to the green part of the chart, so that you have used in the following exercises. I'm opening the floor.
Frederick said, I would like to add that a large number of stakeholders from Centro, in fact, they don't use the SPI because of that Frederick said, because they think that is not robust, is not in the point that can be used. They think that this revisit and this discussion about it and this improvement could be a good reason that that in the future they could use it. But now I'm surprised with that results, because in Centro and in Portugal, I think I could say it. A large number of stakeholders, they don't use this indicator yet.
I mean, this can also might be, I mean, with the survey can be the case after responding to several questions, arriving at this stage, maybe misreading or not really responding. Maybe the answer is based on something that they think, okay, it might be useful actually for these things rather than actually right now. I mean, this is why also we have this in the methodology. We triangulate with other findings, and we're going to contrast before we make any, we jump to any type of conclusion. So, okay, thank you, Carla, for the reaction that a bit confirms the perception that we had, at least from Central Portugal. Please, okay, I see a message from Xavi. So, Elke,
yeah, I read it. So that's the good work sharing. You have to focus on the discussion. I can, in the meantime, check the checked box. So I think Catalonia, anyhow, we knew from the very start that it is a good practice that it has to share. They have, but nevertheless, they are not using probably the EU-SPI, but they, Javier also pointed out that they have their own set of indicators under the name Social Welfare and Progress Indicators. They are very much inspired by the EU-SPI, but also by some other initiatives. And this indicator that they are having here, with this set of indicators, they actually use very much also for the budget formulation process. So he highlights in his comment kind of like the names of the documents as well, so that we can check and see the draft budget that is included in the economic and financial report and the citizen budget document. So, and I think our colleagues from the team from Orchestra who were conducting the review, they have already drawn some very nice conclusions on that we hopefully will be able to share with a presenter from Catalonia being able to speak about it in one of the upcoming events as well. I want to maybe use the opportunity of having the floor to apologize, because I kind of get the feeling that we might not have made it overly clear that it's we started at 10:30 Central European Time, because we just had new colleagues joining us, Carmen and Natalia. So I don't know. We had a short introduction where we also pointed out how to unmute yourself. Angeliki and Natalia, where you could unmute yourself and quickly introduce yourself, where you come from, and your connection and opinion. Angeliki, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? If not, I would also try with Natalia. In any case, yeah, there's the question about the presentation from the meeting, and yes, of course, it will be available. There will be a presentation and also a recording that will be shared with you. So I don't want to take more time at this point and hand back to Frederick, to you, to collect more thoughts if you would like to.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm gonna just one more time ask, because you see the results point to something. It's interesting. Then the reality might be very different. So from, I don't know, Natalia or Carmen, if you have any specific reaction regarding this and how this translates into your region or the level of the organization that you represent, regarding the usefulness of the EU-SPI for a specific type of exercise, whether it's one that is pointed out here, as we ask in the survey, or another usage that is maybe a bit more light communication to citizens, or using to compare and have signals of areas where a political effort might be needed. I don't know if there is any specific reaction on this. The floor is yours.
I think Lena had a problem with her connection, and she said that that Western Greece wants to use the composition for the next development programming. So they have an interest that we can also follow up and see how, and so this was one aspect that she could just drop us. And Natalia has no microphone, and she joins us from Portugal as well. So, hello.
Yeah, welcome, Natalia. Okay, so maybe we move to the next then part. There is no more reaction on this. Okay, so then before moving into the last part of EU added value, we also had something about user friendliness of the platform. So my colleague Laurent also can present this part.
So it was really straightforward questions. We asked about the EU-SPI platform, how the respondents thought that it was at the time where they, so before completing the survey, and the majority of the respondents answered. So 70% of respondents said that the EU-SPI platform was user-friendly, fairly user-friendly or very user-friendly, and that the regional data was in fact accessible. It was not meant, to be to ask if the platform could be improved. It was really just meant to give the opportunity to respondents to answer if at the time. Until now, the platform was user-friendly.
Yeah, and we insist in this because when you look at, for example, other questions that you ask during the survey or the field visits, and people point us out to things that could be improved, other peers for comparison. In Portugal, I heard very interesting feedback of even a system to have maps or infographics that could be downloaded. Interesting features, or we even had one comment, interesting to point it out, that some part of the population might be daltonic, so why not having symbols instead of colors? So I'm repeating some of the things that I heard that could be many ways of improving what it is already there. But here it was just asking about, as it is right now, how do you feel about it? People are pretty positive, but we know there's room for improvement and having a better platform. So we are collecting evidence about it, and this is something also that we will point out in our reporting exercises. Okay, so then to finish, the last part is the EU added value of the EU-SPI. So yeah, Laurent.
So we had one very important question that we asked the respondents. Was basically to know how they would feel if we stopped using the EU-SPI. So the majority of the respondents, over 70% of the respondents, answered that stopping the EU-SPI would in fact deprive them of an important basis for orienting their regional social progress policies, and that as well the EU-SPI, and that's the consequence, is an added value resulting, compared to what could be developed at the national, the regional, or the local level, which means that there's a real complementarity of the EU-SPI to help local or regional, national initiatives.
So it shows again a bit of also contrasting with information that we have from the field visits that, I mean, there is really an added value. First, of course, going beyond GDP indicators and having a framework developed at the EU level. Also, the fact that it brings this feature of being able to compare with one region to another with regions of the European Union. So this doesn't mean that as it is perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, and we collected evidence about it all along survey and other activities. But that the idea and the concept of having this and developing further, I mean, this is agreed by all. It needs to stay, needs to be improved. And that's why one of the reasons why we are doing also this exercise is the Commission is currently conducting this pilot to go towards a better, more robust, most accepted version, more useful version of the EU-SPI index. I think that with this we arrive to the part where we are at the end of the presentation. We open the floor if there's any question, comments, either regarding content of the presentation or things that are going to be shared after, or the results in general. Anything, please feel free to comment.
So for the moment, there's nothing in the chat as well. I think we are quite good in the timing, and I would like to apologize again for the ones that could not join us. The recording will be available. So I don't know if there is any further remarks.
So maybe also just reminding you, so the recording will be available, the presentation. There were some slides that were also a bit hidden because it would have been maybe a bit too much, so they will be available there. And we have the report. This is all based on the report that is there, that is written, that we're going to share with all as soon as we have a bit of a green light also from the EC on what we wrote in there, and it will be shared with all. And again, repeating, we have several activities. Any recommendation or anything at the end of the project is based on triangulation of different sources of information. The survey was a very good first tool to get some insights, to get some signals about important aspects regarding the EU-SPI, but it's one activity among others. And the last thing, to thank you, and if you have any question regarding the survey and the survey results, you can always send me an email. I will be very happy to respond, and then even to have a bilateral call and provide any type of clarification. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in terms of the next steps, we're going to analyze the results of the visits, of the peer visits, and the case studies, and thus we'll come up with some suggestions for further virtual meetings, to which we would like to invite you. And if you have suggestions for topics that you would like to have discussed at those, we are thinking of taking up some of the examples that were discussed today. So, for example, taking the issue of demographics and having a bit more of a discussion where we share good practices. We arranged that some of your colleagues could be speakers on how those challenges are being addressed, or what indicator frames they can be used for certain aspects. So here we want to open up for a few further virtual meetings that will be scheduled and announced during the summer and take place in autumn. And if that's fine for you and you don't have any other comments, we would like to invite to unmute everyone and say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your participation.
Goodbye.
And for the ones that contributed to the survey, to your inputs to the survey. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.